emerge as we sort of go. So yeah, welcome to the last day of the semester. we're at the end. This is actually my last class of the semester, so I know you if you all have more to go, but we're getting near there. We're getting near the end. Yeah, and pretty much all I wanted to do today was just kind of, talk a little bit about that article I had you all read, but I didn't like, there's not that much to that article. Like, I sort of wanted you to read that article so you can be like, wow, I'm a lot smarter than I was at the start of the semester. Because that article was like super all over the place and how it was using terms and like wildly unrigorous and seculars getting thrown around to mean weird things and atheists, who knows, and so, like, I mean, at the very least, we're all, my hope is that you're like, yeah, I have a better understanding of what's going on than I did before, at least. So almost like use that as a chance to look back upon things and see how far we've come. So we can talk about that a little bit. I figured people might want to talk about the paper a little bit. I don't have like anything particular to say, so you all will need to be leading that a little bit, but we can do some paper talk, and then we can just do some end of the semester stuff, right? So maybe talk a little bit about what we've been doing all this time, how to think about it, big picture stuff, and yeah, things like that. So that's all I had in mind for the day, at least. So yeah, why don't we start with the paper stuff? Do business first, business before pleasure. So anyone have anything anyone wants to talk about regarding the papers? So like 8 to 10 pages. Due on Tuesday. But due on Tuesday, ask and I can give you an extension. Not a problem. Yeah, that's like I said. I don't have anything more to say about the papers really. Nice, go ahead.
So you said you'd be willing to potentially look at like a paragraph or something that we've added.
I could even try a draft. So yeah, that'll more of a stretch. But yeah.
Okay. When do you want those by if we're going to send you something?
So starting basically by Tuesday, by the end of the day on Tuesday, I'm going to be grading until I die, I think. So okay. Probably by then, let's say by then at the latest. Yes, at the latest, like say, I can try to look at stuff Tuesday morning. Definitely anything you send me by Monday, I should be able to look at. But I'll try to look at stuff even Tuesday morning.
Okay, cool.
Good. Any other paper questions? All right, then let's just do some end of the semester stuff. Let's just sort of wind it down a little bit. So, all right, the way I teach this class is super weird. I'll let you all know that. The way I teach class is super weird, right? Most philosophy of religion classes, it would have been entirely really within the Christian tradition. That's the standard thing, and it mostly would have been like looking at different proofs of God's existence. And proofs of God's non-existence, and sort of looking at these arguments and seeing if you thought they worked, seeing if you thought they didn't work. One, I don't find that super interesting. Just myself, I'm not. I think it is real value to leaving the assumptions that those of us who are raised within the Christian tradition, which is probably most of us, have, leaving those assumptions a little bit, I find revelatory and interesting. So that's part of the reason I went in a different direction. And the other part of the reason I went in a different direction is I don't think the proofs of God are fascinating and they're like really worthwhile for studying because they reveal real key points in metaphysics, but they have nothing to do with why anyone is or is not religious. I've never met nor am I aware of a single person who was converted or apostatized as a result of any of these proofs. Right? That doesn't seem to be what's going on with religion. Is not these proofs of God's existence, right? They may be, again, they're fascinating metaphysically. I think there's real, like Anselm's ontological argument, there's serious shit going on there. And the stakes of that argument are, I think, vast. But I don't think that's religion. I think that's not what people are doing when they're doing religion, is not that kind of proof activity. So, okay. What are people doing then when they're doing religion, if I'm right? That's what we've been trying to call into question, I guess, right? My sense is, again, assuming you grew up within the Western world, right, and especially within the United States, within that, you grew up with certain dichotomies, right? There are people who are religious and there are people who like science, right? Or there are people who are religious and there are secular people, or there are humanists, or there's people who are spiritual, like all of these various sorts of categories. But my guess is also they were all pretty loosey-goosey. They were all pretty loose, right? They're not super rigorous. You didn't necessarily mean anything super rigorous by them besides a vague, like, I know it when I see it, right? And a lot of the I know it when I see it is, again, restricted to that very relatively narrow American Christian context that we're familiar with, which isn't even representative of like the global Christian context, right? Like the experience of being a Catholic in South America probably doesn't look a great deal like much of any American's experience of Christianity. Right? Similarly, the way in which Europeans are anti-religious or against religion is not the way that takes place in the context of the United States in any capacity. It's just different, right? And so much of what we think of when the word religion gets said is really just predicated upon a very narrow region of time and space. Because it also wouldn't have been applicable to America 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And so it struck me when I was first asked to teach philosophy of religion here at CSU. It was the first time I'd ever been asked to teach the class. It struck me that what would perhaps be valuable is to actually call this question, what do we mean by religion in the first place? To make that the topic of the class. Because I think there's enough there. I think it's a very fascinating phenomenon. And to be honest, I think the way that we characterize it today in the last 20 years in the United States isn't great. I don't think we think about it great. And again, not so much because not the definition of the words, the way we're breaking up phenomenon in the world, I think is obscuring what's actually going on in human lives. And so that's why we went historical. That's why we started with Taylor and we went back to 1500s Europe and saw what was going on there. That's why we left Europe behind, why we spent so much time in the Islamic world, why we spent so much time with the pagans, they're going to see things super different, right? I mean, I don't even think we know what pagans. I think paganism is more. I think atheists and the religious alike would be confused by what the pagans are doing and would not be seeing things the way the pagans would see things, wouldn't draw the lines in the way that the pagans drew the lines. And then we went to the Islamic world, Buddhist world, right? We sort of left North America and then in Europe behind. Right? And my hope in all of this is just that we're getting a broader and broader perspective of how we can break up and characterize things in the world. Probably my favorite person we read this semester is Al-Farabi. Because I think the way he talks about religion is super useful, even if you want to come up with a different word than religion to point out what he's talking about. The phenomenon he is pointing out, the way in which a political community expresses certain norms and values to everyone through myth, through story, through image, through metaphor, that is a crucial part of all of our identities. It's different. It's not the Islamic caliphate that he lived in. For you all, it was probably the Disney movies you saw when you were really young. But those things shaped you in a religious way, in the same way in which Al-Farabi is thinking that Islam shapes the practitioners of Islam. And that phenomenon just strikes me as real. Like there's something, that's an important phenomenon. Similarly, when we didn't read much of it, but when James is sort of going through these varieties of religious experiences, those are things. Whatever we want to say, like he is pointing to things in the world. He's pointing to phenomenon. And I feel like a lot of the real phenomenon of human life gets lost when we have you're an atheist or you're a Christian or you're a humanist or you like science. Like those ways of breaking the world up are missing how deep the ways in which our communal, social, spiritual, whatever that word means. We haven't really talked about that word at all. I have no idea what that word means. But all of these things, like how these things are shape us, are more complicated than any of us are talking. And that's why I say, I'm vaguely dissatisfied with the way that sort of, United States in the last 20 years has characterized this stuff, because I think sort of like it's become, first of all, two sides, and the two sides have pretty radically mischaracterized themselves, their opponents, and the world in which we're all living as a result. So I'm not necessarily giving you an answer to the question of what religion is, right? I mean, that's philosophy class. You never get answers in philosophy classes. So I'm sorry if that's disappointing to any of you, but if you thought we'd have this whole religion problem figured out. One of the things that's really fun to me is how many different papers I get from you all for this class, though. Normally in classes, I get like 30 variations of basically the same paper. In this, the different range of topics that you're all describing is fascinating and wonderful and great, and shows that you're engaging with the puzzle. That's sort of at stake here, the puzzle of how we sort of think of all of this stuff. And so sort of what I'm, I guess, so what am I hoping you take from all of this? The puzzle, right? Like, how do all of these facets of our lives that we've sort of pointed in, how are they going about shaping us? Be it the Nietzsche stuff, be it and the phenomenon that you're pointing towards, the Platonist stuff, the Buddhist stuff, Kierkegaard, like all of these different phenomenon, they're all part of our lives in some way. Even if you're reacting against something, you're still related to it. Right? And so to see the way in which all of these relations are shaping who and what we are in a very fundamental sense, and to be puzzled by that's I guess what I'm sort of hoping you all take from the course. I mean, again, I'm not trying, I doubt I converted anyone to anything. If I did, it would be entirely by accident, so you can't blame me for it, because there was nothing I was trying to convert any of you to, right? I'm a pagan Neoplatonist, right? That's what I am, right? And I mean, that's yeah. I mean, and contrast that with that article, right? I mean, I think there's a need for this kind of analysis, I think, because humans, and even just Americans in the last 20 years, are no longer living in ways that those neat dichotomies capture and characterize. And so we need a reconceptualization of this phenomenon that we're giving the name religion, right? And try to do a better job with it. So yeah, like I said, I didn't have like much for us to do today. I just sort of wanted to chat. So chat. Anyone? What have you all sort of thought, taken away, come away with from all of this that we've been doing? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I guess I would just say I really started to like this class, I think, a lot more towards the second half.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's stuff wrong with Taylor. I didn't, he didn't grab me as much as some of the other thinkers. But I think really Al-Farabi on, it just sort of seemed like it was just huge sort of hit to my understanding of religion after a huge hit to my understanding.
Right.
So I think definitely this class has been hugely influential in how I think about religion. I think if I were to pick a favorite, it would be Kierkegaard. I always wanted to read Kierkegaard, but never got around to actually reading him, and was just sort of oh yeah, he was the father of pseudo-existentialism, and moved on. Reading what he actually means by faith is really interesting. So I think that's the biggest takeaway I've gotten.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, yeah, I'm thinking of revising it a little bit. I'm probably still reading some of Taylor, but maybe doing a little bit less in the future. My sense is that if he had just jumped right into Al-Farabi, it would have been so weird we wouldn't have had any foundation for it or framework for it. That we sort of needed Taylor to be in making more familiar terrain controversial before starting to make the less familiar terrain controversial. But yeah, I in a sense agree with you that where things really pick up is maybe Nietzsche. I think Nietzsche maybe a little bit where he's starting to push some strange buttons and calling some weird stuff into question. I mean, my hope is almost maybe that the first time you're wait, what, is when Nietzsche suggests that the love of truth is just a version of religion. You're wait, what? Come again? yeah. No, I think that seems and Kierkegaard's a fascinating one because the way in which he influences atheistic existentialism as well seems to suggest, again, like that he's pointing to a phenomenon, whatever interpretation we want to give to that phenomenon. He's pointing to something, the way in which sort of that we seem to be responsible for things prior to a sort of an ethical order that we use to interpret ourselves. Yeah. Good, cool. Like I said, we're just chatting today. So does anyone else wanna chat? Wanna do something? Wanna have some things to say? Things to bring up?
I think for me, one of the really interesting things was just kind of like learning how Christianity got to secularism.
Yeah.
And to me, I think I just found that really fascinating, especially someone who has studied a lot of like Eastern religion of like, they just don't think of it in the same way that we do in a very predominant Christian society. And so to me, that was really cool to actually understand the history of like how we actually got there, of realizing like this was a very long process.
Yeah, I agree. To me, that's what I love. I'm a historian. By sort of training, I'm a historian. History of philosophy is my thing. And that's exactly the thing that I always, because always like, our own time always so much seems to us sort of like, of course it's that way. It's basically always been like this way. Game of Thrones, they're all just modern Americans, just in, the Middle Ages or whatever, right? They're all basically just modern Americans. They saw things that, right? And like, yeah, like what's so cool to me about sort of studying these like history of ideas is sort of like realizing that this is just a historical moment too. And it had antecedents, and those antecedents were not what we would have guessed. They are frequently way weirder. And our moment, and it sort of just makes our own moment weirder too, which is again what I always find, because once stuff gets weird, that's when you really start thinking about it, right? When everything seems normal, you don't think about it. It's got to get strange first.
Yeah, it definitely made me kind of think a lot about like just what it means to like impose secularism in different places of in the world. So like that very first article you had us read really kind of hit interesting, where I was like, oh, this is really interesting, of like imposing the way we think on people who think very differently than us. So I found that really fascinating.
Yeah, and you can imagine people even with the best of intentions falling into it, right? Like, because they just assume like, well, everyone's basically an American secularist, right? Everyone's just waiting for their opportunity to be an American secularist or something. And then that's that's how we end up with Iraq and Afghanistan and those misadventures, let us say. I mean, maybe not all good intentions, but at least some of that might have well come from good intentions, but without understanding the context, right, or understanding the fragility of her own situation, it ends up just being another instance of colonialism. Yeah, cool. Anyone else? Like I said, you don't have to, right? I mean, we can just, we're just having fun today. So.
Hi, I have one thing I wanted to say. For me, like one of the most interesting things that like I realized like in the last few weeks is that like even though like largely I feel like very Nietzschean view on religion. I mean, I fucking love Nietzsche. He's like one of the most amazing philosophers ever. But like I agree with him about a lot, and religion too. But then like since like starting writing my paper and like trying to come up with like my own definition of God, more like philosophical white hats like definition. And like sort of like then starting to realize that like religion too can be defined in a way that relates to this philosophical God instead of being associated with like historical traditional religion. That like I really don't like, because like I agree with Nietzsche. So it's sort of like realizing that there can be a different definition for religion than what is most popular, and it doesn't have to have all of those negative associations, even though Nietzsche is right about the traditional religion.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a whole big thing. This happened, the God of the philosophers versus the God of churches, right? Because the philosophers frequently feel compelled to posit some first principles, to posit some transcendent sources of meaning or whatever for just kind of philosophical reasons, right? And I mean, there's that from another direction, right? That too is a way of getting into this stuff that is not the traditional ways, the ways that people sort of just assume what religion has to look like or what God has to look like. Plato didn't have a holy book. Plato was just like, hey, I wonder why cats are cats rather than dogs. And he ended up with the one. to answer why are cats cats rather than dogs, somehow the one was he thinks he needs that. Right? Or Plotinus maybe thinks he needs the one to explain that, right? And that can again give a different way of sort of thinking about some of these questions. I think, and that's one of the things I wanted to do by going to the pagans, because the pagans in general, they're doing something just different than what the sort of world historical religion, basically the Judeo-Christian tradition, right? They're just, and Hinduism, like all of those have holy texts, direct communication from God in some sense. There are things that I think you can call religion where God's not talking to you and never talked to you. And did we reason our way to God? Did we mystic experience our way to God? I don't know, different ways of characterizing it, right? But yeah, it's not we've necessarily, whatever we mean by this in the Protestant context, at least, we might not have faith in our way to God. And that too, I think, raises really interesting ways of thinking about what we mean here. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, that's one of the things I was hoping would happen. I'm glad.
I think like one other thing this class made me realize is like the modern kind of discussion around religion, or like religion versus secularism, is very like reductive and like simple, and doesn't deserve like the depth that it should. And like you could probably spend your entire life studying it and not have like a completely holistic view of it. Yeah. So, and it also like contextualize like our modern kind of like humanist ideas is just kind of one of the steps along like all the paradigm shifts. It's not like it's like superior in some ways, but it's not like the end of all of like human history and like the ultimate way of viewing reality.
Yeah, history is ongoing. It hasn't stopped yet. We're just one passenger along the road of wherever things are going to go next, and who knows where things are going to go next.
Yeah, and in the future, now like we'll probably be looked back on as like primitive and not understanding what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely right. And I also like anytime things break down into two sides, things are going to get reductive and somewhat stupid. It's just sort of unavoidable. Whenever things are reduced to sides fighting each other, that's never the way good argumentation or discussion comes about. And you know, I want to be fully fair with this, right? Like, I mean Richard Dawkins just as much as I mean C.S. Lewis. I don't think either of them are doing great philosophy. And I mean, just because it's I mean, if what you're doing is defending something, weirdly, Al-Ghazali says this. This is actually in The Deliverance from Error. Al-Ghazali says this one point. There's an Islamic practice called kalam, which is basically like Islamic apologetics, sort of like the Islamic authors just sort of defending Islam. And he's like, yeah, this is all pretty useless. like the only thing this can possibly do is confirm what it is you already believe. But it's never going to actually reach the truth. And so he then needs to find some new method besides the kalam to help him with it. Yeah. And so, I think that's another thing I sort of was hoping was happening. We can move past some of, again, the dichotomies or the sides and see if we can maybe come up with some more interesting ways of thinking about some of these things.
Yeah, that's kind of like an early on thing too, is like, once it was said that was a shift that happened in religion to where like you had to be like appealed to rationally to like make you believe in it, kind of. Yeah. That just made it kind of like obvious how people like Dawkins or like those type of like, I guess like militant secularists kind of are just like speaking parallel to like religious language and concepts, like speaking different terms.
Yeah. And making metaphysical assumptions that they're not realizing are metaphysical assumptions. Scientific materialism, that is a metaphysical interpretation that is not anti-metaphysics or anything like that. That is an interpretation of reality. Yeah.
I'll just never get over the fact that Nietzsche hates vegetarians. That is the weirdest fact that I think I will never forget.
I mean, I guess you could say, I mean, Nietzsche hates everyone.
So that's fair.
But yeah, I mean, Yeah, I mean, and it's almost like, because you hear like Anthony Bourdain, who a lot of people really liked, like and I think his hatred of vegetarians is basically identical with Nietzsche's hatred of vegetarians, right? Because like, yeah, Nietzsche's all about like kind of not caring about, like, not letting anything like hinder your expression of yourself. And for Nietzsche, he's very clear, not ethics too. Like, nope, throw out that ethics stuff. That pain itself is part of life, and pretending that it's not is a way of hating life. Yeah, really, if you study Nietzsche a lot, it gets humans start to seem like very disturbing animals. And it's quite fair, like he's not like wrong. 200 years ago, we would have been stunned to the extent of casual cruelty we saw in the world. Right, the number of people who would be attending public executions as a family picnic. A nice sunny day ended with a head getting cut off. What could be better? Maybe throwing some fruit at the guy first before the execution took place, or a nice witch burning or something, right? And yeah, that too. And so for him, right, like, for what's interesting for him is the way Nietzsche sort of thought that, like, for a time that was part of Christianity. For a time, Christianity too embraced that in a certain way, right? And then how sort of our modern temperaments or sentiments can't live with that. Yeah, that's yeah. And for him, that's like, and so we're so skittish we can't even hurt cows anymore, or at least some of us are so skittish we can't even kill the cow anymore. Because it's not ethics, right? Ethics is all nonsense for Nietzsche. Ethics is all just rationalization and self-justification.
One thing I really appreciated about like the scope of the readings was this idea of what we are healing from in terms of religion versus spirituality, and what are we suffering from exactly, right. Especially when we got to when we read James Taylor's like Religion Today chapter, that really got me interested in post-war problems, and then all the antecedent history before, and there's just such a sharp contrast between the individual and collective, like individuals seeking opportunities to heal in whatever way they need, versus like, you know, like you said, 200-300 years ago, like the communities were so, whatever religion or religiosity they participated in was just like the doctrine of the time and could not be like Charles Taylor said, like the subtraction theory or something. Yeah, I mean, Freud himself is well aware that it seems as if what you're doing in psychoanalysis isn't that dissimilar to what you did with your priest. The psychoanalysis and confession is, they don't look worlds apart, at least. Right? There's and again, like the Nietzsche stuff too, like Nietzsche is talking about this as well, right? Like that religion is doing something. It's not just like, here's a bunch of random beliefs, like it does something, right? And that the task that it was needed to accomplish maybe has not gone away, right? It's just sort of has taken on a new form or assumed a different interpretation historically. Yeah, that's definitely something Taylor cares a lot about a lot. Yeah. And if Kierkegaard's right, it's because it's the existential condition of being human. Is to have always already committed yourself to something that you don't know why you committed and can't justify why you committed yourself to it. Always already being in need of justification. Yeah, if we had more time, I would have had us read St. Augustine, because that's what he's all about in the Confessions too. Take medieval philosophy and we'll do that there if you want. Because that's entirely what we do in there, is to do a lot of Augustine's Confession stuff. Awesome. Well, I don't want to it's the end of the semester, we're all dead, so I don't want to keep you here too long. We're at the end of our semester, certainly. So I think probably it's good to start wrapping things up. So I'll hold my office hours like normal on Friday and Monday. I can be available by appointments other times.
But I won't have any sort of scheduled office hours on Wednesday or Friday, just because technically everything will have been due by then. So, but again, I'm available to talk whenever, pretty much. And this is my last class of the semester, so I should just be pretty much just grading until the end of time from here on out. Yeah, I was behind in 2 other classes besides yours, and I haven't gotten caught up with them yet. So yeah, happy to go over anything, look at drafts or whatever. The earlier you get that stuff to me, the better, just because of the time. More likely I'll be able to get you useful responses too. This class comes with a lifetime guarantee. Whatever you all need from me going forward, my obligation to you, as far as I'm concerned, does not end when the semester ends. You need a letter of recommendation? Let me know. I can do letters of recommendation. You just want to talk some philosophy? I love talking philosophy. Nothing I enjoy more. I'd be thrilled to do so with you whenever you wanted to. Or just want to talk about anything, right? Stuff's going on in life. You just need an ear. I'm here for you all. Right, I have to do other things as part of my job, but this is actually why I'm here, is to do this. Right, you're not going to be bothering me. You're not going to be disturbing me. If anything, you'll be saving me from stuff that I don't want to be doing. So it's not going to be a problem. If there's anything I can do for all of you going forward, just let me know. Happy to do it. The only thing I ask in return is fill out course evaluations, because I actually really care about the course evaluations. They're important to me. I really take the feedback seriously. This is only the 2nd time I've taught philosophy of religion, so I think there's room to change things. I've already got some ideas about shifting things around a little bit, so I'd like to know from you all what you thought worked, what didn't. And that already shaped things a little bit. We didn't even do Kierkegaard. We didn't even get to him last time I taught the class. So based on feedback, shifting things around, I think there's still room to grow things. Also, this was a super weird semester, right? Because we've sort of shifted modalities multiple times. It sounds like, well, at least this is what the faculty is getting told, at least. We're getting told that the fall is probably going to be pretty normal. Possibly completely normal, actually. But at the very least, it's going to be pretty normal. That's what they're hoping. That's what we're currently being told to sort of plan for. So that's great. But life comes at you fast and things can change. And it'd be really valuable to know from what worked with as we sort of jumped back and forth between these different modalities for people. That would also be super valuable feedback. What worked and what didn't work, right? We had 3 different ways of taking this class, sort of doing it like asynchronously, doing it synchronously but remotely, and then doing it face-to-face, and then like sort of like partial face-to-face versus full face-to-face. A lot of different ways of doing things. One thing that's cool about that, it's a nice chance to experiment with stuff, just try some different ways of doing stuff out. So I'd also like to hear how that worked, how your experience went with whatever modality you were taking the course in. What worked, what could make it better, what make it worse. You don't necessarily have, even if you don't have much to say, if you're just like, yeah, it was fine. Even that's feedback, right? Even that tells me something. So I do take those seriously. So I'll send out email reminders about it. I'll be open until the end of the semester. And I'm going to give you, once I'm done talking, once I stop yakking for the day, I'll give you the rest of the class time to fill those out too. So yeah. Yeah, I think that actually is all I had, at least for anyone. So any last questions, thoughts, comments, anything before we call it a semester?
Just thank you for bearing with us all.
Absolutely. Not a problem. Nothing to worry about. All right. Well, have a wonderful rest of the semester. I hope it goes well. Don't hesitate. Let me know if you've got questions, the paper, or anything comes up. Extension's not a problem. And yeah, I hope to see you all in the future. And have a good rest of the semester. Enjoy the summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Bye.
Can we talk philosophy real quick then?
I love talking philosophy.
Cool. Okay. I had a couple more Kierkegaard questions.
Yeah.
Because he is not that easy to read.
No, he is not that easy to read.
So he talks about, like, I guess, this idea that so his 3-step process almost